Okay, I think we're live. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining us on the inaugural Holmes Corporation Leaders Edge series, where we highlight leaders and innovative solutions in the workforce, education, and training space. My name is Josh Slayton. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Holmes Corporation. We have a great group of panelists that you can see and that will be joining us here today to discuss a cooperative approach to delivering lifelong career training with a focus on apprenticeships. I'm going to provide intros briefly. Just quick logistics. We are recording the webinar today. We will send out a link to everyone afterwards, as well as we'll be posting it to our socials. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button. Getting the word out on what we do and more importantly, what our partners do is a great way to really help seed the ecosystem to scale change. There's a Q&A function within the Zoom. Please use that to ask questions. We'll be monitoring it. We'll try to get to some of those questions at the end of the panel session today, or if there are follow-ups outside of the webinar, we can certainly address those as well. And we may be also posting a poll sporadically throughout the session today. So as I said, I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Holmes Corporation. Holmes has been for more than 50 years a partner with leading professional associations to help them meet their strategic growth goals through a number of products and solutions, including but not limited to certification prep, enterprise solutions, and member engagement products. As part of this, we also work with over 300 colleges and universities in the United States, including Ivy Tech, who we have on the panel today, and close to 1,000 corporations to deliver our partners' products worldwide. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction, set a little context, and then turn it over to our esteemed panelists. I am joined by three individuals today who are impacting the training and workforce development space in different ways. Ryan Craig. Ryan and I have gotten to know each other over the past few years in his role as Managing Director at Achieve Partners and formerly University Ventures, two leading education, training, and workforce investment funds focused on innovative approaches to scaling education and workforce solutions. So not to use a hockey metaphor for Ryan as a long-suffering Toronto Maple Leafs fan, but Ryan has been at the forefront for not just diagnosing the current problems facing our workforce, but defining and investing into where the puck is going in education and workforce solutions. He has written several books, most relevant to today's conversation being Apprentice Nation, How the Earn and Learn Alternative to Higher Education Will Create a Stronger and Fairer America. Sounds pretty good to me. Highly recommended. I'm almost done with it. It's a fantastic book. Ryan is also co-founder of Apprenticeships for America, a national nonprofit dedicated to scaling apprenticeships across the U.S. economy, and is a senior fellow at the Progressive Policy Institute. We also have Joey Wheatley. Joey is executive director at Ivy Plus Career Link at Ivy Tech Community College in South Bend, Indiana. He is a relationship builder, which I've come to know from our discussions, working with local businesses, industry, government, and community members to provide transformative career development services for Ivy Tech students and alumni. Last but not least, Matt Jerlecki. Matt is the Director of Learning for Lippert, a manufacturing company with more than 15,000 employees worldwide and a supplier to many industries, including recreational vehicles. Matt believes in business as a force for good and has been working at Lippert for the past 2 years, focused on creating engaging learning experiences and environments for its team members, including a high school equivalency program that allows Lippert employees to work towards a diploma, and partnering with community colleges such as Ivy Tech and technical schools to create innovative workforce partnerships, as well as courses geared towards employees earning industry certification, including SHRM, which is one of our longstanding partners. So we're here today to talk through collaborative approaches to solving workforce challenges. Most notably and relevant to today is through apprenticeships. The traditional education model is being challenged. Many could claim that it's not necessarily working or working at scale, not even counting the fact that many jobs that require college degrees probably shouldn't require college degrees. And I know, Ryan, you probably have an opinion on that. We have an educational system that's ultimately catered really towards approximately 20 to 25% of the population. Billions and trillions of dollars in student loans and federal funding is geared towards programs that really aren't providing the right pathways to strong careers or the right pathways at scale. I think the good news is in some ways, people are recognizing that this needs to change, or there's different ways. ECMC Group, in their Question the Quo campaign, found that over 50% of teens were open to pursuing a non-traditional education pathway, like apprenticeships. There's been an explosion of credentials and certifications to over 1 million different credentials as of today, according to Credential Engine, which is up well over 25% since the pandemic, which really highlights the underlying demand to differentiate skills in different ways. I'm going to finish this before turning it over to Ryan first by highlighting kind of one of my favorite surveys that kind of really highlights the stark issue we're facing. Several years ago, the Chamber of Commerce surveyed college and university administrators and industry leaders, so very relevant to this panel, on the question of, are students being prepared for today's workforce? Over 90% of college and university administrators said yes. Over 90% of industry executives said no. So we have a disconnect that we need to solve. Ryan, let's start with you. Why is there a need for a new approach in education and training in the United States, and kind of what's the state of the state as we look at this ecosystem?
That's a great intro, Josh. Thank you. It's good to see everyone and my esteemed fellow panelists here. Your point about the million credentials struck me as funny. There's so many credentials out there that if you're not offering a credential yourself, you probably question your own credentials. Yeah, look, I think the fundamental challenge here is that we have a skills gap that's been well documented. That I think colleges and universities are doing as good a job as they've ever done at equipping young people with the sort of cognitive skills, or what America Succeeds calls durable skills. The mark of being an educated person, right? Critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, and the like. But that, and a generation or two ago, that was sufficient for most good entry-level jobs. Today, it's no longer sufficient. It's no longer sufficient in two ways. One is employers are increasingly looking for, discrete combinations of digital skills, business knowledge, role knowledge. So that's the skills gap. And that's why we coined the term last mile training, to reflect sort of what's missing out there in the current education marketplace. But now you add to that, I think, maybe an even bigger problem, which is this experience gap issue, which is that even if you close the last mile, employers are now demanding, explicitly or implicitly in job descriptions, 6, 12, 24 months of work experience for jobs that even 10 years ago did not require work experience. And that's a huge problem for college grads. I think of cybersecurity as a perfect example, where 10 years ago, a college grad with some technical acumen could get a job in a security operations center as a tier 1 analyst, right? You're sort of first row of defense there. You're looking at alerts coming in. You're deciding which you can resolve yourself, which to elevate, which you can disregard. Today, that job has basically been automated. And so the entry-level jobs in SOX are now what used to be tier 2 analyst positions, which demand a CISSP certification, which is explicitly 3 to 5 years worth of experience. So entry-level job in cybersecurity has kind of become a bit of an oxymoron. And the concern, of course, is that what digital transformation has done to cybersecurity, AI is about to do to every other good entry-level job, right? Because the bargain with entry-level workers has always been, we hire, we pay you. You don't know what you're doing. You're not very productive yet. So while you learn the ropes, you're going to be doing a bunch of grunt work to figure out while you're figuring it out. That grunt work is going to be done by AI. Think about the investment banking analyst, right? Spend 60 hours a week building pitch decks for a client presentation. No one's going to want their analysts spending 60 hours a week building PowerPoints. You'll be spending an hour a week using AI to do that. And the expectation is you'll be spending all your time doing higher value client work and projects, but you won't be able to do that higher value work without experience. And so what happened to cyber is going to happen across the economy. I just saw a post about the big 4 accounting firms. They're expecting to hire a lot fewer entry-level workers, and the entry-level workers they're looking to hire are going to be doing higher value work. So that's the fundamental problem. We have this experience gap that's going to become a chasm as well. And so I think that, in terms of the challenges facing our education system, affordability has been on the front burner in terms of student loans and loan forgiveness. I think the biggest issue is about to become, how do we make sure that every student gets a relevant in-field, hopefully paid work experience, or multiple of those before they graduate at whatever level and begin looking for their first good job or gateway job. I think that's it's going to be paramount. And I think that in 5 years, you're going to see states and accreditors requiring that school systems and institutions mandate that you can't complete the program or credential without having that relevant in-field work experience, because otherwise they're not going to be employable.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Ryan. We're going to certainly come back to that and how we, build that work experience and how we build that at scale. Joey, I want to hear from you. You're certainly in an interesting place as part of this ecosystem, right? Community colleges have faced challenges, declining enrollments, funding issues, poor outcomes in some programs, right? Matriculation to four-year schools. Kind of where do you, trying to figure out where you sit within this broader ecosystem. Can you talk through some of the challenges you've been facing at Ivy Tech community college, and you're a network of community colleges, right? So you have you're in South Bend, but you have a network of Ivy Techs kind of in the broader ecosystem, but then also as relevant to this as part of workforce training.
Sure. So it's been an interesting challenge over the last couple of years. I'll just harken back to COVID as kind of being a hard reset on a lot of things that we consider normal, whether that's in the education space, industry, everything kind of had a change at that point. And that's when I actually joined our local campus here. And just the transition from making everything virtual, realizing that things like welding and other, hands-on trades can't really sustain that kind of model in that time, really made us rethink how we deliver those type of training options, whether that's somebody coming in on a dual credit from a high school standpoint, industry partner like Lippert coming to train with us, or someone just on a standard student pathway. Coming out of that, Northwest Indiana is very entrenched in manufacturing. So in our area, our two biggest service partners are between manufacturing and healthcare. And as you can imagine, 2020, 2021 wasn't a kind time during that area. And I think the last two presidents, Trump and Obama, at different times actually came to our region because we're so entrenched in kind of RV manufacturing, pontoon boat manufacturing. Whenever the economy takes a slight dip, we are the kind of bellwether for that. So just in the last 10 years, there's been everything from upwards of 20% unemployment to coming out of COVID all the way down to below 1%. So as a community college, we really kind of have to adapt pretty quickly to either kind of take on an influx of students, get them upskilled while there's that unemployment, or when there's these times that we're currently in with low unemployment, we have to really engage with our employer partners to find creative ways to keep their workforce kind of upskilled in this ever-changing Industry 4.0 environment. There's a lot of opportunities for everything from robotics to smart sensors and very niche areas of improvement. But what we're kind of going to talk about today is just, your standard non-trade apprenticeships that we're developing, which include everything from HR to lean to quality and a few other areas. So for us, it's been I think a good kick in the butt to kind of like be agile in how we engage with the community, just because coming out of the big change over the last couple of years, employers want something that they can do quickly. Ivy Tech has an 8-week system with their classes, which is pretty quick when you're talking about a standard college semester. But even then, we have to work with employers to find creative ways to even shorten those down and train specifically to different industry credentials or certificates or certifications. So it's really been a two-way conversation over the last couple of years on what they're looking for and what they need, as opposed to just doing it how we've done the last 30 years. So it's been a welcome change for us. Matt's been a great partner, as well as all of the other governing bodies that we use in our credential training.
That's great, and a great transition, setting up Matt there for being a great partner. Matt, we're starting to hone in on some solutions here, right? Talking about, how you guys are partnering together. But Matt, from your perspective as on the employer, right? So the same, opposite side of the same coin of trying to solve workforce challenges. Can you just talk about kind of how you have viewed the world in, you're a worldwide 15,000 employees, and the need around talent sourcing or looking at talent sourcing and development differently than, as Ryan talked about the traditional model or where things used to be and how that used to work and why it's not working today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Ryan had stated earlier, he's exactly correct in the sense that the skilled positions that we're looking for, they just don't exist out here. Like they're not there. So Lippert had to look and say, okay, there's really three pools of folks that we can draw from, right? Our existing team members, we can upskill our existing team members. We can hire new people off the street that we got to train from scratch. And then the third piece that maybe we'll have time to get to is, like our high school students, like this bank of high school students that we could start tapping into them earlier so that when they graduate, they're ready to go. So our initial partnership with Ivy Tech started by us focusing on our internal team members. Because as Joey mentioned, coming out of COVID, after the harsh downturn, we expanded exponentially, and business was booming for a couple straight years. So we were forced to move people into positions out of necessity that may not have had the things that Ryan had talked about, like either prior experience, the right skill sets from a college, trade school, whatever. So now we have these people, it's kind of leveled off some. We have these people in quality positions, HR positions, lean, safety, leadership, etc. that, okay, you're now here, but there's a definitive skill gap for these folks. How can we fill that? Because we're not going to be able to say to everyone, okay, you can go to college for 2 years, come back to us. Or they're not going to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to go to class 2 to 3 nights a week, every week around family, other obligations, to work towards a degree or those types of things, the traditional model. How can we just get them the very specific skill sets to perform better in their job? So we approached Ivy Tech and said, okay, well, a semester long course, meeting twice a week from 9 to 10:15 during the day is not going to work for a manufacturing operation. Like, sorry, Josh, we're not going to let you leave work twice a week, for 5 hours and hopefully you'll come back. So we needed to look at every single piece of this puzzle. And we really were very, very intentional. And you mentioned, I appreciate that, being a force for good. We wanted to make sure that it was good for everybody. So if everyone could see the win, we knew that it would work. So we looked first at the team member and said, okay, our current team members, whether they be hourly or salary, what is a schedule that could actually work for them that they would be willing, themselves willing, not us telling them to, but they would be willing to go out and get these new skill sets. Again, whether that's Six Sigma yellow belt, whether that's a SHRM certification, which you had mentioned, whether that's supply chain certification, SOCA certifications for advanced manufacturing, any of those. How can we incentivize that so that it's worth them going? So one, we knew we had to cover the cost of the school. Two, we had to make it an advantageous schedule for them, because again, they're not going to take night classes, again, around family and having to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get to work at 6 o'clock. Okay. So, and yes, we want these people to work for us forever and ever and ever and retire from Lippert. But if this certification or this skill set was not good for them as a human, that they could take it with them to their next job, their next career, the next city, town, state that they live in, again, this is not going to be very advantageous for me. So we made sure that in any of the courses or anything we worked out with Ivy Tech, the team member got this at the end. There was something tangible for them at the end, and they knew it. Okay. Then we looked at our operational staff and said, okay, we can't just say that they're going to do this on their own time. We're going to have to make some operational changes to allow folks to do that. So we said, what day of the week? So we didn't, some of our plants work 4, 10-hour days. We're not going to do it Thursday afternoon because that's part of their weekend. What day can we make this work? So we landed on, and we've kind of branded it that way, Lippert Wednesdays. And so we looked and said, okay, so like 1 to 5 p.m. works. They might have to get a little extra childcare, but not that much. They can leave work at noon, get their lunch, have time to get to the campus, and make sure that they're ready for learning. So operational. Okay, if you're an hourly team member, you could work a little extra Tuesday, a little extra Thursday, come in early on Wednesday. You will not lose 1 minute of pay to be able to do this. And which a lot of industry doesn't look at when they look at a traditional training model, because they'll say, okay, this person's being trained for an hour. We pay them $20 for the hour. Okay. And then they just do that math. Our folks are not on the clock, and they're making up those hours throughout the week. So we're also not losing any production time from these people. So again, that's another big win for our operational staff. So we got the team member addressed. We got the operations of the facility addressed. Okay, hey, Ivy Tech, what's going to work for you? And again, they have a lot of morning classes, a lot of evening classes. Middle of the day is, open on a lot of their campuses and in a lot of their labs. And, they have some professor flexibility during the middle of the day. And we sat down with them and said, hey, can we try this schedule? Instead of 16 weeks, twice a week, can we just do 8 weeks, 1 day a week, 1 to 5 p.m. and see if that works? We tried it with a single cohort of 12 people in a basic electricity class. At this point in time, roughly 2 years ago. And it just worked great. So we went from one, advanced manufacturing technical class to 2 to 3. And then what I call like our departments all said, man, this seems to be working great. Can we add? And the first one we added was quality. We added a quality assurance class where they got their yellow belt. And we said, hey, can we start doing this with our quality folks? Sure. Ivy Tech, awesome. Okay, let's try these. So we did that. And then everybody else just goes, hey, this model seems to work. Like, it doesn't hamper operations. We have all these people volunteering, willing to do it. And last semester, we call it sessions because we have 8-week sessions, 5 of them throughout the year. We had like 13 different classes running. Again, everything from HR, supply chain, CAD, OSHA 30, supply chain. Like, we can give you the list. And it's just been awesome.
That's great, man. A couple things I want to just kind of follow on and ask Ryan about and Joey about here. Right, you're talking about the benefit that you're seeing with students, right? It's and your employees, where it's flexible, the cost to them, right? They're receiving real on-the-job training. You're scaling it somewhat within Lippert. Ryan, as you look at the state of apprenticeships, though, in the United States, both historically and kind of where we're at today, there's clearly a disconnect between what we're seeing and hearing of the benefit of what it can provide at Lippert and how Ivy Tech can do this, and just the amount of funding and the amount of students. I think I read somewhere, probably your book, that we have 3 apprentices for every 100,000 people, or every 1,000 people in the labor force, which is, I think England and Switzerland and Germany are like over 30, right? So it's a level, just we're not at that scale. And you all brought up skilled trades. I think we've historically thought about apprenticeships and skilled trades. Well, that's not necessarily the apprenticeships of the future that we need. So can you just give us kind of a lay of the land, Ryan, on kind of where we're at today and kind of where this disconnect is between what I think a lot of us see as the value in apprenticeship programs and why we just aren't at any level of scale?
Yeah, no, look, and I'm glad you started with the skilled trades, because that's where apprenticeships are actually doing pretty well in the US. And I think that's because apprenticeships are a good way to learn to use tools. And the fact of the matter is that in a digital economy, we all use tools. And we're not necessarily taught to use those tools in our education system. So apprenticeships are a great way to learn those skills. You're absolutely right. As a percentage of the workforce, we're 0.3% of apprentices. The giants of Central Europe are 10 to 15 times. So Germany, Austria, Switzerland, they do 10 to 15 times better. What is surprising is that countries that you don't necessarily identify with apprenticeship, like the UK, Australia, France, they do 8 to 10 times better than we do. And a generation ago, they looked a lot like the US, where 70% of those, so about 500,000 apprentices today, that's 0.3% of the workforce, 70% of those apprentices are in the building trades. In Australia, the UK, France, now those apprenticeships are across the economy. It's very common in those countries to launch a career in tech and healthcare and financial services as an apprentice. It's extremely uncommon here. And the big reason is that where kind of the dirty little secret of apprenticeships is that, there are obviously exceptions to the rule. There are employers who are farsighted and recognize that it's going to pay off to make this investment in effectively, what is an apprentice? An apprentice is a worker, full-time employee, who's not productive on day one, is not going to be very productive for a lengthy period of time, which kind of runs counter to every trend in the labor market, which is companies want productive workers, and they don't want to pay for workers when they're not being productive. So the dirty little secret is that for the most part, where apprenticeships flourish, whether they be in Germany or in the US construction trades, they're not flourishing because employers are more farsighted or more benevolent in those countries or sectors. They're flourishing because there are ecosystems of intermediaries who are doing the work of setting up and running these programs for end employers. In Germany, those intermediaries are chambers of commerce that are actually required by law to do it. In the UK, Australia, these are HR services companies, staffing companies, nonprofits that have been lured into the business of becoming an apprenticeship service provider by government funding and government subsidy. So in the UK today, you have this ecosystem of 1,200 intermediaries who are doing the work of setting up and running these programs that involve recruiting, developing the curriculum, delivering the curriculum, mentoring, registering, dealing with the funding, and perhaps most important, serving as the employer of record for this unproductive worker until they become productive. So where we're seeing the biggest growth in apprenticeship in the US today is with these intermediaries that are providing truly turnkey solutions for employers, where employers don't actually interact with the apprentice until they're trained and productive. And even then, they might not even have to put them on their payroll. They may stay on the payroll of the intermediary. So that's what Apprenticeships for America is. It's this new national organization, which is a trade association of apprenticeship intermediaries that range from workforce boards to nonprofits like Apprenti in Europe, to for-profit hire, train, deploy companies like Skillstorm, to some of Achieve's portfolio companies that are very vertically integrated, like Optimum Healthcare IT and Cloud for Good. So that's where we're seeing the growth. The problem, of course, is that we don't fund it. So the reason we're so far behind is we spend for every dollar we spend publicly on apprenticeship, we spend $1,000 over $1,000 on accredited post-secondary institutions. For every dollar of public funding and support that an apprentice receives, university students are receiving $50, and no other country is at as out of balance as we are. If you look at the UK, France, Australia, they're 10, 20, 30 times more funding per capita than we provide for apprentices. So, and then we're funding it wrong as well. We're not doing formula-based funding like every other country does, where the funding should travel with the apprentice, where the Department of Labor is trying to pick winners and provide grants to workforce boards and community colleges that don't employ apprentices, don't actually create apprenticeship programs themselves. And the result is very little in the way of apprenticeship job creation. So that's where we are. Where AFA has done quite a lot over the last year and a half to help move the needle on policy at the federal and state level. Happy to get into that. So we're heading in the right direction, but there's a long way to go. The good news is that we can just look at what these other countries have done, and all we need to do is follow their example.
That's great, Ryan. Thanks. And want to come back to a couple of those frameworks things you brought up. That you're a trade association. Associations clearly near and dear to our heart at Holmes Corp, and how they can kind of sit within this ecosystem. But Joey, from your perspective, kind of, as you think about where you sit, how you've kind of built these apprenticeship programs, and then your work with intermediaries. I believe the last time we talked about the intermediary in Indiana. Can you just tell us a little bit about how your experience building these apprenticeship programs, and then what your experience is working with these intermediaries, and where you sit and they sit, and kind of how you provide services and solutions to enterprise partners and to the actual apprentice?
Sure. So my first foray into the whole apprenticeship realm was just straight through our trade unions. So we would partner with, the IBEW or metal workers or bricklayers, and we would be the related technical instruction provider. And that was where I was being introduced, at least on behalf of their intermediaries. But we're pretty lucky in our Northwestern region to have a few different options. So, there's state and federal funded agencies through WIOA, other ones through the Department of Labor. Work One is a big partner, I think, that we utilize with Lippert specifically, as well as a recent grant funded option that was added to our campus. These are 3 different sets of intermediaries that have different functioning capabilities, but can essentially take all of that paperwork or, the big lift off of employers, because not every company might not be 15,000 employees strong like Lippert. We'll work with companies that are as small as 5 to 10 people. They might not have a designated HR person there to update kind of the necessary documents to track a standard apprenticeship that's registered through the DOL. So being able to work directly with local, state, or federally funded agencies that can take that lift off of those employers is really kind of taken the burden off of the employer, who might not have that extra person to do the tracking or updating through the DOL website. So that's been a big bonus in the last couple of years, I'd say, that's not necessarily tapped into or known about by a lot of smaller employers. And Matt can talk to it a little bit more about how much Work One has kind of assisted them specifically. But what it also unlocks is a lot of funding opportunities as soon as you register for any sort of full-fledged apprenticeship. Locally, we have funding available through what's called the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership. So that would be a partnership between our 2 local counties. There's state funding that gets unlocked when you register for that apprenticeship as well. So there's a few different ways to subsidize the cost for the educational side of the apprenticeship model, as well as kind of take the burden or not have to fill out all the necessary paperwork to track and get that journeyman's card at the end of the training period. And they've been extremely flexible in allowing us to tap into a lot of the different already registered apprenticeship models that can essentially be copy and pasted into what you're doing, edited down to your specific position and title that you're registering an apprenticeship for. So really leaning into not just your state, but your local workforce boards really kind of takes the burden off of the employer from doing the heavy lifting to get an apprenticeship off the ground. Once it's up and running, it's pretty simple. And I try and express that a lot to anybody that's interested in getting their own apprenticeship program started, is that once you get it off the ground, it's a pretty slick and easy thing to keep going.
So Joe, you've highlighted some of the great things that work. I think you've probably also highlighted some of the challenges there, right? Because you're working with state, local workforce boards. Matt, I'd love for you to comment on, just as you've gotten this off the ground, you've talked about growing it, adding new programs. But then as you also look to move to different regions, right? What have you learned along the way? And from a challenges perspective and Ryan, maybe you can then chime in, the fact that a lot of this funding does go to state, local agencies to serve as intermediaries, to serve as funding. Is that a big impediment to scaling apprenticeship programs, and how do we solve that? So Matt, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll try and start at the beginning. So yes, our company had some longer term 2 and 3 year apprentices registered, but it was like a 1 or 2 off position, like CNC or something like that. When we started running these courses, the thing that was nice was we were able to look at different funding options, and this was one that presented itself. And we looked and said, okay, so we can take our existing team members that have taken like one course, which is roughly 50 hours towards an apprenticeship, and go, okay, there's this, the U.S. Department of Labor has probably a catalog of 5,000 different registered apprentices. A large number of those are 1 year apprentices, a 1 year apprenticeship. So, that require 144 hours of outside training, 2,000 hours of work, and then a specific list of internal competencies. Well, we looked at the skill sets that we were trying to get trained: safety, quality, lean, supply chain, HR, advanced manufacturing, and they already had them. Those apprentices already existed. So we were able to look and go, oh, these certifications that we want them to get already exist in this apprentice. It may not have the exact, and I'm laughing here, but the exact title that we want it to be, but all the competency and the certifications were. And then we could come back to Joey and say, hey, we know that your supply chain 200 class doesn't typically have this certification, but can we modify the curriculum just enough so that this certification is included, so that when they take these 3 courses, they've got the right certifications, they apply for this apprenticeship? And it was like, yes. So we went from having, 1 or 2, that got done every couple of years, to like registering 52 apprentices in a calendar year. We just had 12 people. What's going to be 13 plus 12? We're going to have 20 people complete their apprenticeships this June. Like right now, they just got done with their 8-week session, and that's everything from supply chain, HR, et cetera, which again, like Joey said, allows us to tap into some state funding. There's the regional partnership that gets Lilly grant. And so, yes, that's the rub. So there's two negatives I'll point out with the apprenticeships. Each state is different. So each state, when I go to them to try and set this up, we started in Indiana, modeled it. Then we went to Wisconsin. Now we're in Texas. Now we're in Florida. Now we're in New York. And it's kind of like choose your own adventure at each one of these states, because some of them have workforce boards that you deal with, that you get block grants. Some have its local unemployment office that you deal with. Some it's a combination of the two. And so there is no consistent path. Some have representatives that actually work for the U.S. Department of Labor that you deal with in states. Some manage apprentices by themselves. So you have to register it with the state first before that it gets registered with the U.S. Department of Labor. So, to Ryan's point, it's crazy town with that. But the other piece that I agree with everything Ryan has said, but the other difficulty is humans that exist now in 2024, when you sit down and say to them, hey, are you going to sign up for this 2-year thing? And we can see this in regular graduation rates at 4-year colleges, that 50%, luckily 50% maybe will finish. So if I'm going to sit down with you and say, hey, do you want to sign up for this 2-year apprentice? It's great for you, all the positives. They're looking at me going, I don't know if I got a softball game this weekend, let alone what I'm going to be doing 2 years from now. So they just bypass the whole discussion. What we've been able to do is set short-term goals. Hey, take one class, and then we can introduce it after you've already started down the path. None of our people started as apprentices. They became apprentices after they were doing certain things. So we've got to be careful with some of that. And I will touch on, Wisconsin and some other places where we've developed, like we talked, welding apprenticeships or fabrication apprenticeships. We've severely condensed that time frame. And so if it's a 360-hour apprenticeship, we're doing it in 9 straight weeks, 8-hour days. And yes, the colleges look at us like we're crazy when we propose that, but eventually we do it. And we do like a MIG welder in 20 consecutive, weekdays at 8 hours a day, where they get CAD print reading, OSHA 10, and they're registered as a MIG 1.1 welder. So they get their 1-year apprentice hours up front, and then they work for us for the 2,000 hours after that, instead of the typical 4 hours a week working towards your apprentice. And then we hope at the end of the year or 2 years that you become an apprentice. So even the apprentice model that Europeans and still exists in the United States, we're trying to change the dynamic of that to make it work again, because so that it's a positive for the team member, so that they can see something tangible right away and they're not crossing their fingers. I might be here in 2 years. I don't know.
Ryan, do you want to touch on kind of the policy landscape and how kind of the challenges that Matt has highlighted or Joe has highlighted, kind of where do we need to go and what is happening on the policy front that'll maybe make this a little, I hate to say easier, but more seamless for companies like Lippert to scale apprenticeships, or schools like Ivy Tech to be a partner with those apprenticeships?
There are two fundamental problems. There are not enough incentives to create apprenticeship programs and hire apprentices, and then the process of registration is really designed for the building trades, and there's a whole set of dozens of policies you need to create to submit and be approved for registration that really aren't relevant for lots of sort of new collar, white collar tech, healthcare, and other apprenticeship programs. So we dramatically need to streamline those requirements. Just in terms of the incentives, I talked before about the level of funding, but that funding today is it's distributed down to workforce boards, which are local, which means that a national or even multi-state company looking to create an apprenticeship program in more than one city or region, or let alone doing for remote workers, there's just no way to do that, right? You're not going to go to 20 different workforce boards across the country to request funding for your apprenticeship program. Makes no sense.
Are there things in the works or policy being proposed at all? Is this because
that's what the idea of formula-based funding at a federalized apprenticeship system with formula-based funding. States should also have incentives for apprenticeship program, but it's very simple, right? Cost of the training, the cost of the formal classroom-based training should be covered. Every other developed country that I've mentioned covers that cost of training. There's a schedule. They have occupational skills frameworks established, and if you're providing training in that, for a registered apprenticeship in that occupation, you're going to receive this level of funding for that training, and in addition, an incentive payment. So every time an apprentice is hired, there's an incentive payment for whoever the employer or sponsor is for that apprentice. It's pretty simple. The good news is that 2 years ago, California launched the first formula-based funding in the country, called the Apprenticeship Innovation Funding, $175 million for a 3-year period. And California is now seeing unprecedented apprenticeship creation and growth. So we know it works. And that's how you begin to attract, hundreds and thousands of new intermediaries into the space like we've seen in the UK, right? In the UK, you won't find a company that hasn't been approached by a half dozen apprenticeship service providers offering to set up and run apprenticeship programs for them. That doesn't happen here. And so companies like Lippert feel like they need to do it on their own. That's not that shouldn't be, and it isn't the only answer, and it's certainly not the way to get to scale.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it seems like,
and just
go ahead, Matt.
hey, Josh, just to add what he said, he's exactly right. We're doing it out of necessity. Like, trust me, I'm not doing it because it's, fun or easy or anything. We're doing it because in these locales, we need those team members. Like, we need that skill set if we're going to be able to continue to expand our operations, meet our customer expectations, et cetera. So, yeah, it's not easy, but we're doing it 100% because we need to.
Yeah, you're on the front line of the skills gap, and so you're forced to do it. Most employers will just say, I'll leave that job unfilled, or we'll figure out some way to use contractors or part-time workers and to fill those positions. But look at again, cybersecurity, 700,000 unfilled jobs in cybersecurity. So what's the answer? The answer has to be apprenticeship at scale.
At scale. And this seems like, our two sides don't get along on much. This seems like this would be, to your point, Ryan, it's simple. It's something that everybody can get behind. So hopefully we can.
I talk with progressive Democrats. I talk with conservative Republicans. Everyone's on board. I mean, the fact that California is leading on this, and other states like Indiana, Alabama, as deep red as they come, are like pushing the boundary on this issue as well. It may be the only thing that everyone agrees.
I mean, that's where I was going.
And the thing, Josh and Ryan, the thing that's funny is every single one you have, different grant applications that you have to fill out, and they're all different and nothing is the same. They're never in the same order, but I could write the same exact sentence for every single one of them. They want people living in their state to make more money, to pay more taxes, to stay living in their state. Like, that is it. So this model that Ryan is talking about, it works for everybody. California, that's lost citizens, knows that if they do not create incentives for their people to upskill to be able to afford to live in California, they're going to leave and move somewhere else. Indiana, lower, cost of living, et cetera. Well, for us to attract people to come here for all the new investment that's coming into Indiana, how are we going to get those workers to want to come to Indiana and rent and buy a home and spend money in the restaurant? We've got to get them to a skill level where they can afford to do that. So you're exactly right, Ryan. It doesn't matter what state it is. That principle is universal, and they all want to figure out a way to do it.
I'm going to pivot here towards the end of our conversation. This almost hour has gone by really fast. I'm sure we can keep going for more. In various parts of this conversations, we've talked about occupational frameworks. We've talked about competency models. We've talked about certifications. Something obviously that's very near and dear to Holmes Corp is working with professional associations like SHRM, like ASCM in the supply chain, PAO, APIC, and others. And Ryan, in your book, you mentioned that virtually all countries with strong apprenticeship systems establish occupational frameworks for companies and intermediaries to follow as they develop programs. Can professional industry associations play this role? Or what role do you think they could play as a workforce intermediary within this ecosystem?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's going to happen. And I think that bureaucrats at the Department of Labor are going to be writing occupational skills frameworks for every apprenticeable occupation? I hope not. Pretty sure that they won't. So I think that professional associations and other groups that are much closer to the ground here need to take the lead on it. We need to figure out, first of all, once there's, I mean, for example, Urban Institute has done a good job creating occupational skills frameworks for a couple of sort of high need tech occupations. We need more examples like that. So I can imagine Department of Labor providing funding to directly to associations or to companies like Holmes that will be able to coordinate with a number of associations to get those done. I think that ultimately the funding entity, which is almost certainly the Department of Labor, is going to have to approve them. There's going to have to be some way to approve them, but the development of these frameworks, I think, needs to occur outside of government.
Excellent. And then Joey, from your perspective, you embedded this, and I think obviously, with partnership with Matt and Lippert, embedded the SHRM certification within your HR apprenticeship program. Can you just talk a little more about kind of how that works and ultimately why you felt it was important to kind of have this be part of your overall kind of programming?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, it was a kind of mandate by the college, especially in the advanced manufacturing section, where we were seeing a lot of non-completions in a full associate's pathway, was to embed a lot of certifications into just every single class you would take. So that no matter what, if you came for just one or two different classes, you might not walk away with a certificate or technical certificate or an associate's degree. But at least you walk away with something that is transferable into the workforce, recognized by industry. And then it's a two-way street there. We also have a list of hundreds of certifications on our website that we recognize as crosswalkable, is what we say. So the SHRM certification itself is recognized, I believe, for 3 different business level classes. So it's like a business 101, 105, and 111 or 211 or something. The numbers escape me, but if you were to come to us off the street with your SHRM certification, we would essentially award those classes to you because you have that industry experience. We have that third-party validation that you've kind of benchmarked that knowledge that would be taught in those classes. So that's really how we pegged a lot of the progression of a lot of the classes we did with Lippert, was tie those industry certifications to those classes. Because we're delivering them in a shortened fashion at 32 hours instead of the full 64, we're able to test at the end of the class the same certification that you'd be taking if you were to take it as a standard student. So it kind of validates that experience, the knowledge that a student that took the full length of the class would. So that third-party governing body like SHRM kind of takes that out of our hands to validate that they have that experience for us to be able to award out that credit as if you were a standard student. And that kind of partners very well with what we're doing with Lippert, where we can kind of benchmark their experience as they go through the program. I know that they track all of those certifications tied to their employees, and vice versa. We can also kind of remove some of the prerequisite programming for some of these classes. If we're talking advanced manufacturing and you want to go into robotics, you might have to take a basic electricity class before you enter that 200 level class. But those certifications, you can either kind of test out of those essentially, or if you have that previous experience, jump right into the field that you're looking to study.
That's fantastic, Joe. I mean, I think just the model of, recognizing the certification and crosswalking it to credit, it truly becomes stackable. So not only is it recognized within kind of the industry, but it becomes stackable if you want to work towards any further associates or beyond. So we are amazingly almost at an hour. So I'm going to end the official panel discussion right now. But I'm going to get to a couple Q&A that we have received here just to finish this off. Again, just for everybody that's on, we will be sharing a link to this webinar, through more broadly. Pass it on. I hope everyone found this informative, invigorating, thought-provoking. I think those that are on this call or listening to this or watching this, are really part of that network that can drive change at scale, right? And as we all know, education has multiple inflection points or inflection eras that we're in, right? And hopefully we're in that inflection era where we're moving towards just more alignment around education, training, workforce enablement to fill the skills gap and skills need that all of us have highlighted here. So quick questions. I've got a few here. Let's start with, we're going to start with Matt. Matt, how do you measure the success of the program at Lippert? I'm gonna keep
Okay,
it a
so the
couple
first,
minutes.
yeah, oh yeah, no, the first one that I always use is we look at our retention rates of the team, any team member that's taken any single one of our courses, and we're above 95%. So any team member that has taken these, along with other series of courses that we offer, like CDL, et cetera, 95% of those folks are still here. So I challenge you to find a retention plan, program, system, something that someone is running that's effective as that. And then obviously we're tracking improvements in quality, safety, lean, those departments as these team members gain those skill sets.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Joey, I got one for you. Funding for this program, how much is student pay, Lippert pay, funding from all these various assortment of bodies that we've talked about? What does that look like?
Sure. So on a class by class basis, we kind of have like a flat rate agreement plus whatever, certifications or materials are needed for, the SHRM certification comes with the books, and those get stacked on a per person basis. What really drives that cost down is tapping into the local workforce boards for those funding opportunities. So that can be anything from a block grant that might be granted directly to Lippert, or individual funding opportunities like we're exploring with an upcoming CNC class that we have. A state funded workforce ready grant is what it's referred to here, as that there's certain job descriptions that and training opportunities where the state of Indiana will fully cover for an individual to go through a training. So it'll range everything from a zero cost individual level, to a few $1,000s to $10,000 a class, just depending on the subject matter, the materials for the class. And then we work with Matt and his team to tap into the different resources to drive that cost down. So I would turn it over to him. He's more on the spending money as we are the invoicer. So Matt, you can speak to that maybe a little bit better than I can.
And yeah, so for the CNC and the welding, things like that, we're paying their hourly wage, and our goal always is to tap enough funding that we can cover all the educational costs. The team member for sure is going to pay zero regardless. But we've been fortunate enough, and as we've scaled the program, a lot of these agencies have wanted to partner with us more to provide more funding because they see the success that we've garnered, through this relationship.
That's great.
And it's a two-way street too. We have relationships with, obviously the state. We are a state-funded institution, and then our local workforce boards. So sometimes we get wind of grant funding that might be available. I obviously reach out to Matt to let him know to apply for it, and then vice versa. As a private industry partner, they find dollars and bring them to us. So it's a two-way conversation there.
Awesome. Ryan, I'm going to leave a last question for you and then just open comments from you to finish us off here. One, any place you recommend for people that are on this call listening from just resources, learning more about this? You've talked about Apprenticeships for America. Is that a great place to learn more? And then just any open final thoughts on apprenticeships and how we can go forward?
Yeah, look, it's going to take a lot of us and a lot of work, but the good news is that we're heading in the right direction here. So I'd encourage all of you to take a look at my book if you don't have it, Apprentice Nation. Not that I need to sell more books, but it's a good primer if you're just looking for where we are in terms of state of apprenticeship and what we need to do as a country to build an apprentice nation. And feel free to reach out to AFA. They're a great resource for on all these topics. And I want to thank you, Josh and Holmes, for convening us today. This has been great.
Thanks, Ryan. So that it does conclude the panel session today. Matt, Ryan, Joey, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, more importantly, for what you're doing to build this. Just a lot of fantastic things. I mean, you're an example of them. A lot of fantastic things going on in this space. How do we do it at greater scale? Hopefully we can all be part of that solution. Thank you to everyone that joined the conversation, and we will see you the next time.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.